first ever attempt at doing an ASMR video or anything like this, so please bear with me. Before we get on to tonight's feature presentation, I'd just like to mention that the purpose of this channel is for me to do rambles on my favorite movies as I comb through my somewhat large Blu-ray collection and maybe fuel some interesting comments and debates in the comments section below. At some point, I'll probably try to incorporate movie props that I own, costume articles, or just other interesting knickknacks that are film related. I don't know yet. We'll see how this goes. So without further ado, the film we're talking about tonight. "28 days later. 28 days later. 28 days later." As the box suggests, it's from Danny Boyle, the director of Trainspotting. It's kind of funny to me to look at this box now. I mean, this movie's almost 20 years old, and when this Blu-ray was released, I'm pretty sure the movie had been out for almost 6 years, maybe. I don't know, maybe 5 years, something like that. So, the original pressing was a DVD. They had just made the jump over to Blu-rays and re-releasing catalogs on Blu-ray. I believe this is a Fox Searchlight film from 20th Century Fox, but I need to double check that. The box never closed properly. Used to drive me nuts when I was younger, but I was happy when they gave me the engraved Blu-ray box. I couldn't stand when I would get the one that was the decal, and then you would rip off the plastic, and it would take half of the decal with it and just look like trash. Let's take a look at this synopsis here and see how accurate it is. Director Danny Boyle's groundbreaking take on zombie horror has been hailed as the most frightening film since The Exorcist. When a deadly rage virus transforms the world around them into a seemingly desolate wasteland, a handful of determined survivors attempt to salvage a future, unaware that the worst is yet to come. That's pretty accurate. I would say that that's kind of right on point, because it's not, it's not a zombie film. 28 Days Later is one of those kind of movies that takes the tropes of a zombie film, but then changes it into something else. The creatures are not zombies. They don't die and then come back as flesh-eating monsters. They simply get infected very quickly with a virus called the rage virus, which is basically like a super form of rabies. And that's pretty much where that virus stops. I mean, there's nothing crazy that goes on with it. There's no real mutations or anything like that. People aren't growing tentacles or becoming these like super duper zombie people. They can die by getting riddled with bullets. They don't have to die by headshots. So it's it's not a zombie movie, but it does have that apocalypse, end of days, swarmy, hivey kind of feel to it that is present in a lot of zombie movies. A movie that kind of reminded me a little bit of 28 Days Later, but wasn't executed, I think, nearly as well, was a film called The Girl with All the Gifts. That was somewhat recent. On the box, this kind of makes me laugh too. The advertisement for smart technology. Now, on this entire spread of the jacket, all you really get is on the front, you get a picture of Cillian Murphy in this kind of, I mean, if you didn't know who he was, and at the time of the movie, unless you saw The Wind That Shakes the Barley, which a lot of American audiences probably weren't all that familiar with, at least from like a pop culture, household name sort of standpoint. I mean, it's not really something that people, talk about at the dinner table. But you would have no idea that that's him. His name is nowhere on this box. There's a picture of him kind of in black and red, but it's like, who is that? It could be anybody. And then on the back, there's no mention or anything of the stars outside of this, the marquee block. So I mean, the real star of the 28 Days Later Blu-ray, if you ask me, is the Blu-ray technology, because it's literally everywhere. It's in more places than the actual name of the movie that you picked up. So, I thought that was funny, because this box, which would normally be filled up with somebody's face, like the main actor, right, is advertising smart menu technology, which is basically just pulling you through all the special features here and telling you that while you're watching the movie, you can hit a button on your controller and it will pop up and spread out, and then you can continue watching the movie while you're also accessing certain special features. Cool concept for movie lovers, but I'm pretty sure the general populace did not like the fact that some menu could pop up over top of the movie you were trying to watch accidentally and take you into commentary or some storyboard stuff. Not sure how successful that technology was. I don't even think I use it. I typically just access this stuff from the front menu. But, the idea was in the right place, I guess. As for the special features, we have commentary with director Danny Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland. If you don't know who Alex Garland is, he did a great movie called Ex Machina with Domhnall Gleeson, whose father is in this movie, Brendan Gleeson, and Oscar Isaac and Alicia Vandiker. And great movie about artificial intelligence. Super, super intelligent writer. There's also deleted scenes with commentary, but I watched them. They really don't add anything to the movie, and you could totally tell why they were cut out of the film. It's not like anything went wrong with the acting or the filmmaking, but sometimes, and more often than not, scenes are deleted because they either don't move the plot forward, or they kind of upset the pacing of the story overall. Sometimes they give too much exposition for something that's just going to be shown to the audience later on, and if there's a screenwriter out there who does not like to hold the audience's hand, it's Alex Garland. He really does not like to spell things out for you too much. He gives you just enough to form an opinion, and then it's up to you to debate it. That's not to say that he lazily leaves things open, but he doesn't want to dictate the experience to you. He wants you to have your own. So I think he's a terrific writer. Anyway, back to the movie. Pure Rage has the making of 28 Days Later interesting and kind about the struggles of, filming with next to no budget and not really having the proper permits sometimes, or having the proper ability to shut down streets in England, in London, and having to get like Girl Scouts to hand out cookies to be able to get traffic to stop, because there's no way that, pedestrians are listening to a PA, a production assistant, telling them you can't cross the street like at rush hour or something like that. No one's gonna listen, but who can not? Like, how can you get mad at Girl Scouts, right? So, interesting little anecdotes like that throughout the commentary. And inside of this Pure Rage documentary, I would say that I didn't ever watch the music video, and that's not to say, I don't think I ever looked at the still photo galleries either, all those images you could just find online. The music video, though, is not to say that I don't like the music of the film. I actually really like the music of the film. I think John Murphy's kind of rock electronic score is perfect, and In the House in a Heartbeat, I think is the name of it, has been used so many times on trailers since this film came out. I still heard it the other day on something else. I was like, oh my god, they're still using that. And you know it right away when you heard it. But the music is great. This is also the film that had me discover a band called Granddaddy. There's a song called AM 180 that just gets stuck in your head. There's a scene where the characters are kind of ransacking a abandoned grocery store, and it just starts playing, and it's perfect. But I remember, I think I was in like art class, and I started humming it. I was like a junior or something like that, and I started humming it, and the kid next to me was like, "Oh my god, I hate you! Like, thanks for putting that in my head. I don't even know what it is." You'll know it when you hear it. It sounds like an old Atari game. At least the hook does. Great song. AM 180 by Granddaddy. Anyway, I digress. This is probably the gem of the entire special feature catalog here. The animated storyboards. It's kind of like an animatic, and for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's where they kind of want to show the concept of what the film is going to be, or what a section of the film is going to be, and then they animate, drawings, kind of to make like living live action storyboard sort of things, so that you can get a sense of the pacing and the tone, and add music to it, and maybe have some kind of commentary over it. Really fascinating, and really shows that there was a lot of thought put into this movie. They took this very serious. And of course you have the theatrical trailer and the teaser, and I mean, at the time, maybe there wasn't a way to watch that. I mean, YouTube was around, so you could totally get this, but I don't think anybody was posting content like that. It wasn't really it didn't flourish online yet. Now you want to watch a trailer, you just come onto YouTube or any of the other 1,000 sites that focus on movie trailers. But they always included it as a special feature. I guess to kind of pad the lack of special features, but whatever. Anyway, let's actually talk about this movie. And just a word of warning to those of you, if you're still awake, if you haven't seen it, it's been out for almost 20 years, so you've probably heard about it, at least in some way. And if I spoil anything, I'm sorry, but I really want to discuss this at depth, so I'll give you 10 seconds to, switch off the video or really, really quickly fall asleep. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we are entering the spoiler zone. So, if you've seen it, you know that the movie opens up in a very similar fashion to a little show some of you may have heard of called Walking Dead. 28 days later, it should be already mentioned, came out before Walking Dead, and came out even before the comic of Walking Dead was even pressed. That doesn't really matter. I mean, both things have their own merits. You know, they're all taking away from George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead in some capacity, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, so everybody's kind of piggybacking off of everybody else. It's just a genre. But I always found that similarity pretty interesting. Anyway, our main character, Jim is his name in the movie, played by Cillian Murphy. He wakes up in a hospital bed. It's completely abandoned in London, and he doesn't know what's going on. He was in some kind of accident. He's a bike courier, and I guess he got hit by a car at an intersection, and it put him into a coma. So he slept through the entire outbreak. He wakes up not knowing where he is or what has happened. All he knows is that he's hungry and he's thirsty and no one is there to help him. So he starts to walk through the streets of London, which are completely empty. There are some shreds of newspaper articles that say that there was an evacuation. There are other areas where people have almost done like candlelight vigils or put up postcards to people who are still missing because they had to leave on the evacuation and didn't have time to collect all their family members and friends. And then he goes into a church. And that church scene, I remember, like, that's when the movie, for me, got real. Because in the very beginning, what I'll call the prelude, I kind of jumped over it a little bit because it tells you a little bit about where the virus came from. It came from the monkey that had the rage-infected virus, but really at the end of the day, we don't know where it came from. We don't know how the monkey got it. All we know is that a bunch of kind of like extremist activists went in to go break out a monkey out of a testing facility and didn't know what they were getting into and unleashed this virus onto the world. You know, no good deed, right? Anyway, back to the church. He goes into what I think is like a chapel of some sort. Somebody's written like the end is, nigh or something like that. When he calls out, a bunch of people pop their heads up in kind of this very weird, it almost reminded me of something that you would have seen in like Pink Floyd's The Wall kind of way. Their faces just look totally messed up. And you can't really see that much detail because they're so far away. But you know something is wrong, and they are amongst a sea of dead people. And then all of a sudden you hear this clamoring at the door, and you see the shadow of somebody behind it, and a priest bursts through the door, and he's totally infected, but Jim doesn't know what that means yet. So he's trying to like ask the, saying, "Father, please, are you hurt, Father? Can you help me, Father? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And the guy keeps coming at him, and finally Jim has no choice but to kind of, it's like a spastic movement to defend himself, and he throws the man down. And then he notices his eyes, and they're blood red, and he's bleeding from his nose and his mouth, and something is definitely wrong with him. And that sparks a chase because he runs away from the priest, and then all of the rage-infected people come running after him down the streets, and that kind of triggers a series of events that has him go and get the help from Selena. And I think his name might be Greg. He's, I apologize, the person upstairs walks very heavy, and it comes right through my floor, so I hope that doesn't wake you up. Maybe you can't really hear it when I play it back, but I apologize. Anyway, they go down into the subway system after they blow up the gas station and get the rage-infected people off of them. is a bit of social commentary in the film on that, as there was always with the George Romero zombie movies, which were very much, in some ways, fueled by the Vietnam War. So I always thought that was an interesting little monologue that he delivers, and really adds a sense of character and wholeness to the character, because we don't get him for very long, but you feel bad for him in a way. Like what he watched, and watching his sister and his father just get sucked in by the rage virus is just terrible. And then we also get to know Selena, but she's kind of she's a little bit of a tough one. She doesn't really let her guard down. She's very arm's length. She doesn't want to get too attached to people, because she's a survivor. She's obviously lost people, and she doesn't want to get attached, and I can appreciate that in some ways. She's kind of like Michonne from Walking Dead when we first meet her. Anyway, that's, I believe, Naomi Harris is the actress that plays her. Yeah. And super talented actress. Again, wish I saw her in more stuff. She's great. And can play a variety of different roles. She nailed Selena. I mean, she was great. Totally believable as somebody who would survive. It was like, you definitely were like, this person knows exactly where she's going and what she's after and what she needs to do. And she was not afraid to leave people behind. And so, at some point, Jim decides that he needs some sort of closure. And he goes back to see if his parents had been evacuated. And when he finds them, they have committed suicide. And he goes back to watch some video, and the things jump through the windows because they see the light, and it results in an attack that ends up taking Greg. I want to say his name is Greg. I could be wrong. But it ends up, causing him to get their blood in his bloodstream through a wound. I think one of them either bites him or cuts him or scratches him or something. I think it bites him. It's bleeding a lot. And Selena just looks at him and is like, because she knows that you only have like 10 seconds before you change. And she just takes him out. Again, another character trait of her that just shows that like that was her friend. But, in the moment when survival comes into the question, it's all about survival, and those kind of little relationships don't mean anything. And Jim is not there yet, so he just can't believe that just happened. They travel more and more. They finally get to a housing block, or apartment building, whatever it's called. And, in their moment of need, they are taken in by Brendan Gleeson's character, whose name I can't remember. He's another terrific actor. And his daughter. And, those two are really, I feel like they're the heart of the movie, if you want to talk about screenwriting. Because the father is there to protect his daughter no matter what. And the decisions that he makes throughout the film are designed to protect his daughter over the group. But he's also a good-natured person, and he won't leave people behind, and he won't abandon anybody. And he has faith. And I think that character is both wholesome and tragic for those reasons. They go through a lot throughout the entire film, and when he finally meets his end, it's really sad, and I remember being really bothered by that, because he seemed, kind of reminded me of my dad a little bit, about how, he'd do anything for his family, and he'd help anyone if he knew he could help them, and he'd at least give it a shot. And, you always want those people to be rewarded in stories, and when they're not, it really is heartbreaking. But 28 Days Later takes itself very serious. In the third act, it turns turns into some kind of a different sort of movie. It almost, in a way, reminds me of the premise of like the original Hills Have Eyes or I Spit on Your Grave. Where somebody gets wronged in a really bad way and then has to execute vengeance, on those who did the wrong in the facility that they did the wrong in. I'm sorry, not Hills Have Eyes. Last House on the Left, another Wes Craven movie. Come on, get it together, man. Anyway. Well, actually, Hills Have Eyes does have a bit of that. Never mind, I take it back. Anyway. So, at the end, they meet up with this military outpost who, at first, makes it sound like they have like a plan or they have some kind of a cure or they know how to stop the rage-infected virus, but at the end of the day, all they're really doing is they're just kind of bleeding everyone dry, and the people that come through there are being used as resources for one thing or another. If you know what I mean. They're not the best people. There is one amongst them who is really not in the group with them, and he's kind of ostracized and excommunicated from the unit in a way. They end up killing him. But he knows what they're doing is wrong, and he's just kind of trapped by the circumstance. Everyone else is just basically almost like a mindless, marching ant. And when things go really wrong, they don't know how to handle it. And Jim turns into something entirely different, not infected, but in a way, hatred fuels his motivation, and he becomes one with the infected and kind of works like in concert with the infected. He uses them as a bit of a distraction to get him into the facility to kind of take these people out. The ending is like bittersweet. It kind of ends with some hope, but we don't really see a lot of that go on, and kind of there's no real closure at the end except for like a single plane that flies over. But I mean, it didn't give me like this feeling of like, oh yes, like this is grand and this is great and these people are totally safe. It was a glimmer, and that's the thing about 28 Days Later, is that the situation might be a little bit over the top with the virus and everything, but the way people behave is pretty realistic. The violence is very quick and very brutal, and a lot of the action in the film has a lot to do with the way that it was shot, which was on digital, and digital cameras back in the early 2000s are not what digital cameras are today. Today, there's a lot more depth of field. There's a lot more, meaning that you can create a lot of distance with light, and you can make things feel like they're actually in environments by racking focus and doing different things to position them through obstruction. But back when these cameras were being used, it was very flat. Everything kind of looked like it was either in focus or completely out of focus. It didn't have a lot of range, and very desaturated. And their particular cameras were very pixelated, and that was intentional. It was designed to be shot like almost like a surveillance camera. At the time, because of all of the attacks that were going on around the world, the terrorist attacks, a lot of places began to beef up their security, and one of the things that they did, and I think Boyle specifically mentions that in London, there were cameras everywhere you turned, and some of the angles selected in this film are very odd and very twisted, and what they call Dutch angles. feel like it's a little bit askew and something weird is gonna happen. And that was intentional. He wanted you to almost feel, get this like voyeuristic quality of you watching Jim walk through the streets or watching them go through the city. I think it was very effective, and I think that some of the frame rate choices and dropping the frames and speeding things up was extremely effective, especially in showing the speed at which the infected people move. They are like lightning. Terrifying. Another thing that I really like about this movie is the pace. It's really, it's quick. It's not a slow burn. I wouldn't call it that. The character, from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to sleep at the end of the movie, like the moment he's laying in bed, is just totally like, it's just go, go, go. He picks up people, he loses people, he picks up things, he loses things, he gains confidence, he loses confidence. It's just constantly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There's a ton of compelling conflict. And it just moves. You really do. By the end of the film, you're like, holy cow, this was crazy. Like, how this evolved was crazy. I really like all the performances, and I found that everybody was very believable. And, now, 28 Days Later did spawn a sequel called 28 Weeks Later, and I don't have anything against that movie. It's not my favorite film, and it certainly is not the caliber of storytelling that 28 Days Later is. But it does have its merits, and some of the performances in the film are just awesome. Robert Carlyle is excellent. Imogen Poots is great as the older sister. Rose Byrne is always good. Idris Elba is in the film for about 5 minutes tops. But he definitely has a presence. I didn't even know who he was when I first watched it. I hadn't seen anything that he'd been in, and I hadn't watched The Wire. At the time, I watched it since. What a terrific show that is. Anyway, so, but yeah, that one is a little bit different. That is almost more of an action movie. Everybody's walking around with a lot of guns, and the military has more of an involvement, and it's more like you see establishment crumbling rather than, seeing the aftermath and people trying to pick up the pieces. They have establishment in that one. Humans have basically taken over the land from the infected and are starting to kind of repopulate, but there's an infrastructure, and then you basically watch that infrastructure completely fall apart. Whereas in 28 Days Later, the infrastructure is gone. Nobody's repopulating anything. This guy is like waking up to a bloody blank canvas. And it literally kicks you in the back of the head right from the get-go. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth a watch, and I hope I didn't spoil it too much for you, because the experience of it is definitely something worth watching. If you have seen it, I'd love to know your comments on the film and what you liked or disliked, and what you agree with me on and what you disagree with me on. But, that's about all I got for 28 Days Later. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, you can give it a thumbs down. Totally up to you. If you want more of this and you want to be notified about it, click the subscribe button. It'd be nice to know that people are actually enjoying the content. But I had a good time talking about this, even if I was just talking to myself. And I hope to make more of these, every week. I kind of want to pump one out a week if I can. It's getting to that time of the year, which is my favorite time of the year. I may just want to do a deep dive on that and do like one a day or something like that if I can, and talk about them in great length. But other than that, you know, I don't have anything else to say about 28 Days Later at the moment, but I would love to have the conversation in the comments below. If there's any movies that you guys would like me to talk about, please let me know, because I'm always looking for something new to watch, and I'm always enjoying watching things over again, and I'd love to have that conversation too. Let's take a look inside the box real quick, because I only have a little bit of time left on my card here. 28 Days Later. You don't get much with these older edition Blu-rays. Some of the things, like from Shout Factory, and places like that, you'll see, like when I pull them open, it's like, holy cow, like this is a whole production. But you know, in 2007, when they weren't really sure if any of this was gonna really do anything, this was about, you know, what you got. Which is fine. The movie plays. But there's my camera. Uh-oh, that's a cinema sin. I can't be doing that. Anyway, 28 Days